Hello, I'm Cheryl Meyer, and I'm otherwise known as Cheryl M. Health Muse. And what my goal is to inspire you to lead a healthier life. So when I proposed my podcast, I proposed that we present it in two different segments. The first one is It Feels Good to Feel Good, Future Proof Your Health, where I get to share everything I have learned to return my health back to relative wellness and to live a pain-free life in spite of the fact that I have autoimmune disease. But the second part of my podcast is this episode, and that's Tell Me Your Story, the Health Muse is in. My concept with this is it's all fine and well that you hear me tell my story, but I get a lot of, it's all fine and well that it worked for you, but it's not going to work for me. And I wanted you to hear that there are lots of people out there that have made changes in their lifestyle that have supported their health and brought them back to relative wellness. We all have a couple things in common. We all owned our own health. Whatever the doctor was suggesting we did was going on a parallel path to us making these lifestyle changes where we did things that cleaned up our toxic load. We all pay attention to our body. You'll hear jazz in the background because I want you to listen to the rhythm of your health, and I want you to pay attention to what your body is telling you. My body had been trying to tell me that I was going to topple over into toxic load for some time. I just wasn't listening. So if you clean up your lifestyle and if you listen to your body, you have a very good chance not of being deprived in any way, but returning to feeling darn good. And that's what these podcasts are really all about. So thank you for joining me. This is going to be a Tell Me Your Story, the Health Muse is in episode, and I hope you enjoy it, and I hope that we all inspire you to lead a healthier, happier life. Thank you.
Welcome to another edition of Tell Me Your Story, the Health Muse is in. And this is going to be a really interesting conversation for you all to listen in on because it surprised me, and I know that it surprised my guest, that she ended up in the life situation that she ended up in. No matter how careful she had been with her life, she ended up renting a home to people who abused the tenant relationship and completely toxified her home. So I want you to hear this whole story because I don't want you to ever end up in the situation that Kathi McCarty ended up in, which is why this conversation is so interesting. Now, Kathi McCarty and I originally got interested in talking to her because, like me, she got an autoimmune disease. She got Graves' disease, which is one of the two thyroid autoimmune diseases that people can get. And you know that the autoimmune family is one big family. Well, she got the Graves' disease. And unfortunately, with the Graves' disease, it dramatically impacted her eyesight. So when she discovered she had the Graves' disease, she did put plans in place to make significant lifestyle changes, and that would have all been great until life threw her a curve. So this story is going to be interesting to you on a variety of different levels. So stay with us because you're going to learn a lot. I learned a lot. I'm really glad that I met Kathi because she has raised my awareness about things I had no idea went on or could go on when you're a property owner and when you're renting property. So welcome, Kathi. I am so thrilled to have you here today to share your story. And I know that people listening are going to be fascinated with everything that you have to say. So thank you for joining my show. I'll let you tell them a little bit about what your background is, because that makes it even more surprising that this came out of the blue and impacted your life. And then we'll go from there into what exactly happened.
Cheryl, I'm delighted to be here. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure to get to know you and to address your audience today.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to have you. So this is great.
Yeah. As you mentioned, my background, I had a 30 plus year career in an extensive area, over 20 of it specifically in residential lending of many different types, not only in California, where you're at, in Southern California, where I lived in San Diego for about 20 years, as also in Colorado here when I moved with my family in 1995, and have been here ever since. And so I had an extensive 30 plus year career in lending. And then ultimately, the last 10 years of my career transitioned to retail banking. So had real extensive background in not only the residential space of lending, but also the commercial end, extensive commercial lending as well as land and all sorts of peripheral areas. So I felt seasoned and very I had a very comprehensive understanding of the process of what it means to potentially vet a tenant and the pieces that go along with that, because I also owned a couple of rental investment properties in my past as well. But once I was diagnosed with Graves' disease, and I journeyed through 4 major eye surgeries in about 8 to 9 months, I made a decision, what seemed like a sensible solution to me, to rent out the home that I lived in, because all my kids had grown and were off living their lives. At that specific time, I believe they were all in some various level of college. And that seemed like a sensible solution to leverage my largest asset, our home.
So you decided that you were going to rent the home
Mm-hmm.
so that you would have enough money to get all your kids through college, and you had an extensive background on how to do this and protect yourself, which I think is important for everybody to understand, because when they hear what happened to you, if it could happen to you, it could happen to anybody. And that was what got my attention. So explain to them what happened.
Sure. Yes, it was an interesting journey for sure. The first year that I chose to rent out the home, I did it myself because I had been a landlord before and felt very comfortable in the space of understanding credit, one's capacity to rent, cash flow, to vet a tenant, to their history, their resources, even looking up a criminal background and asking specific questions and actually verifying resources, making calls and verifying
Which
resources.
A lot of people don't do, but
They
obviously
don't.
you knew better. Right.
Sure. And I know that sometimes people have, bumps in the road along their way. And if they had a credit issue in the past, that doesn't mean that they don't have capacity today and things like that. So I chose a couple of times to rent it out a little bit more short term for less than a half a year. And then when my youngest son came back for college for the summer, we got to be there together. And then when he went off to college, I re-rented again. And then my life took a little bit of a turn as I got through the surgeries that I had to literally realign my eyeballs. It's called strabismus surgery. I had 2 of them to realign the eyeballs that I had from previous surgeries that misalign them to deal with the TEDs, the thyroid eye disease that you mentioned. I chose to have a property management company help me because I was stepping into the next chapter of my life, which was not able to go back to the career that I had in banking. The significant damage that I have to my eyes and my sight is permanent. And although I can see, and I have so much gratitude in my heart that I can see and navigate many areas of my life that I wasn't able to earlier. I knew I couldn't go back to that career, and I had moved on to new chapters, and that sometimes had me out of the area of Colorado where I'm at. And I chose to have one more round of renting out the home. to a tenant through a management company that I was very familiar with their vetting process. And they ultimately rented it to a tenant, a single individual. And within 90 days of his tenancy, I was contacted by the management company that I had a water line break at the home. And it was outside, so there was no damage to the house. And our home was actually, it was a restored cabin. It was a adorable 1956 cabin. It was like our tree house. And I lived in the foothills of west of Denver in a bedroom community called Evergreen. And it was just darling. And it was the place I wanted to stay forever. Anyways, that being said, they rented it to him, and within 90 days, I was contacted about this water line break, and they had somebody working on minor repairs. And I'm like, great, that's why you hire a management company. I was actually in Evergreen that day at a local restaurant, having lunch with friends when I was contacted. So I was close. And then the next morning, I received a text from the property manager that they were digging. And I didn't know what they meant by digging, because I thought there were minor repairs going on at the home. And I reached out. I did not receive a response. So I went up to the property, and the digging that I witnessed was anything but minor. There was a significantly large piece of excavation equipment on my driveway with a hole that was about 10 feet long, several feet wide, and several feet deep. And this was anything but a minor repair. And to me, it was shocking. It was absolutely shocking. I attempted to reach out to the property manager with no response. I spent a handful of hours on the property with the excavator and eventually the plumber. The cabin, I got really bad vibes going on. I chose to walk around the outside of the property with the excavator, and behind the home, there was some equipment that I could not recognize, and some equipment that I did. There was a couple of propane tanks, a couple of buckets. There were some hoses. There were these tall steel cylinders, silver cylinders I could not recognize. I reached out to the property manager. The response was anything but something I expected, something alluding to, well, we don't know what he's doing is illegal. I had pictures of those within a couple of days, along with pictures from the inside that the property manager shared with me. I took them to our local sheriff's substation, and within a couple of days, they got a search warrant. And in that search warrant that they presented, they found not only the hardware, the chemicals, and a large supply, but they found a meth lab, a methamphetamine lab. And our home had been turned into a meth lab. There was also a significant amount of other drugs and what I refer to as a small arsenal of very dangerous guns. It was a truly shocking experience.
It was 90 days into the rent, right?
90 days into his tenancy. I had been reaching out to the property manager about, did they go through a walkthrough? And yes, they do that within the first week, and all sorts of things. And, no news was supposed to be good news then after that walkthrough. And I wasn't asked to perform. There wasn't a need. I wasn't given the need. And that was very obvious why there was no need, because he didn't want anybody to be there. And I learned, through this process that there was never a walkthrough that was ever done. So.
Oh. And you had used this management company before. You trusted them. That's why you chose them.
Well, I didn't use them specifically for any investment needs before, but I was very familiar with them and their process. Absolutely.
Because of your previous position.
Because of my previous position. And yes, it was a truly shocking experience. I learned many things. I found myself it took me 18 months to go through a civil legal battle. This is part of my aha of, you never want to find yourself in this particular position. And I'll go early into this process with you. Two things specifically is, as much as I know that the civil judicial process is there to protect us, it can be an illusion of protection. And as much as I know insurance has been there for me, God knows I am here with you today, seeing, because I know that I had access to great healthcare and the best of doctors, that neuro-ophthalmologist who helped retain my sight, and more, and other types of insurance. But in the insurance industry, what I also learned is, under property insurance, unless they break into your home, under vandalism, under residential real estate, which is a 4-unit or less building. It could be a single family home, could be a duplex, it could be a triplex or a fourplex, but 4 units or less, even when it's used for commercial purposes, our insurances are void. I haven't been able, through my communities or tribes or other professionals, been able to find a single carrier out of hundreds of property insurance underwriters who provides any type of endorsement to cover criminal activity. And
now,
so
did
that's an
the
illusion
sheriff
of protection.
arrest him?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely. So on October 2nd, 2018 is when they served the search warrant. He was very resistant in where they looked around the home. He was asked to, stand aside, behave himself, or they would have to handcuff him. He chose to leave. And in the process, they spent about 8 hours in my under 1,100 square foot cabin. The Drug Task Force that serves our county, and they seized all the evidence that was needed, and they caught up with him later that day in our community and arrested him. He was incarcerated for about 2.5 days, I believe, initially. Was given bail. He made bail, and he had requirements of his bond requirements that he had to satisfy. I think it was about 30 days later or so, he violated his bond requirements. He was rearrested. He spent another couple days in jail. He was let out again, making his second bail. And then we went through a series of where I actually had to evict him in order to then deal with the home, the water line break at the home, and the actual contamination that I learned about post having to evict him. What a great guy. He was willing to let me pay him to get out of the lease early, since I had what was referred to as an inhabitable home, because we had to shut off the water because of the water line break. But in the end, I spent about a month in that process, having him evicted. With that, there was a series of not only civil steps that I had to take, but then there were some criminal hearings that he had to appear for. And he stopped appearing before his actual criminal trial, which was set for January of 2020. And he fled, and he was never, in that particular situation, he was never tried for the 14 felony counts that he was arrested for what he was doing at our home, until June 8th of this year. So for about 1.5 years, he was on the run, I guess is what you want to call it. There's a pandemic going on. They're letting people out of jail. They're not looking to necessarily incarcerate if they don't have to. And the systems are so overloaded. They don't have the manpower to look for a guy that, according to them, was not charged with a violent crime. Drugs is not a violent crime, even though the arsenal of guns was certainly able to commit some pretty heavy bodily harm.
And totally
That be
frightening for you.
it is totally frightening. There was a lot of emotional impacts along the way. So I went through the steps of a civil action against the property management company for what I believed was lack of their fiduciary responsibility and their neglect and their misconduct of what they were privy to and didn't act on in, in the best interest of the agreement that we had as my property management company. That being said, that particular situation ended in, I'm able to talk about it in the sense that it ended up in mediation, where I believe that I received a fraction of what I should have just to put this behind me and get out of it and move forward. That being said, the tenant was on the run, probably contaminating other homes. He was picked up June 8th of this year, early in the summer, on a traffic stop of all flukes in a community just north of Denver here, in one of our suburbs. And he has been incarcerated ever since, going through a series of hearings. And it was only a week ago today that he actually accepted a plea bargain from the district attorney's office in our county, and will be sentenced now on December 10th. So there will be some closure,
Which is, thank God.
which is good to know. He was looking at between 8 and 32 years is what I understand for what he was doing at our home. And now sentencing will be somewhere between 8 and 12 years. So, and we all know in the judicial system that you become, or some people may know, some may not. I'm learning as I go, but you're eligible for parole potentially with good behavior and things like that in about half the time. So it's hard to say, but he could be out in as early as 4 years plus time served, minus time served, and out. So
Now, explain. Now, I have no idea what happens when meth is manufactured.
right.
So explain how disastrous this was for your home.
Yeah. Well, if you Google methamphetamine and what goes into it, it's pretty shocking that we as humans would even put these types of things in our body. There's a pseudoephedrine, the Sudafeds and things like that. Several years back, they became, put in lock and key, right? Locked up behind the pharmaceutical counters and things like that. And that's because of methamphetamine manufacturing. Yeah, there's all sorts of other awful chemicals. I know before we started talking here, I emailed you a
Right.
list of ingredients. They're pretty intense, battery acid and all sorts of other things that are just shocking. But that
Yeah,
said,
and they're all disastrously toxic.
they are. Here's the thing. There are a few different ways to consume meth. One is through snorting it, turn it into a powdery substance and snort it. The other is they, you like other awful drugs, you somehow liquefy it and put it in a syringe and you inject it into your body. And then the other way to do this is through smoking it. And it's through the smoking it and then the exhaling of the smoke, the residual smoke that gets into, that permeates into our surfaces. Behind me, I have drywall here at the home I'm in at today. I see drywall, in your home. And, but my home was also a log cabin. And so the wood is much more porous. I only had a couple of walls that had drywall even on it. And most of it was wood, plywood, wood floors, wood beams, gorgeous, log beams and things like that throughout the home. and you can't sand it down. All you can do is cover it up or encapsulate it. You can scrub as much as you can, but there's so much porous wood and crevices that you really can't get in there. And so that was an additional challenge. I had several remediation companies up there, and although they were all very happy to try, none of them really did think they could be successful in getting it clean based off of our state standards. And so I'll share with you a particular number. The number's 0.5, 0.5 per 100 milligrams per centimeter squared. So you take a little 2-inch square and they do a swath and they get a measurement and they take that on different walls and then they average them together to get an average of that room as far as contamination. So 0.5 is our standard here in Colorado, and yet 9 of the 11 zones in my home ranged between 69 and 119 to a 0.5 standard. So, and no insurance.
Your home was destroyed.
No insurance.
Home was totally destroyed.
Right. And the insurance, the attorneys for the property management company for their insurance carrier, their E&O insurance carrier, they were looking at different companies and all sorts of ways that they could clean this home to meet the Colorado standard. One of the recommendations is to even take drywall and enclose in the rooms and cover them up and encapsulate the meth within drywall. If I wanted a home that had drywall, I would have bought a home that had drywall. I wanted
but
a
even
log
at
cabin.
that, it's going to leach the chemicals.
Well, that's what I learned.
Yeah, and then they're going to go through the drywall. So anybody who buys that house from you or rents that house from you is at significant health risk because they're in your house. And then you're the person who's left holding that responsibility.
Right. And if it passed a snapshot test, once they finished their voodoo, that didn't mean it wasn't going to return later. And then I was putting not only myself at risk, Cheryl, but of course, my family and, my friends, people, that came to be in our home. And it's a health risk, no doubt. I learned that it's hugely a health risk. I'll give you one example, especially small children, the tinier bodies take the biggest hit, especially at those highest levels.
Yeah, their bodies can't handle the toxins. That was one of the things I wrote about in my book. Their bodies their systems aren't ready to deal with that kind of toxicity. Their bodies are too small to deal with that kind of toxicity. It's a disaster for a child.
It is. And I mean, I've been looking up test cases and all sorts of reports from not just here locally, but all over our nation and literally all over our world. And our youngest are the most susceptible, and our unborn children. I mean, I have 3 kids and they're all of that age of, marriage and having children one day soon, potentially. And the thought of having them being in our home that's supposed to be a sacred space to really cause huge harm to a child, to an unborn baby is just criminal. Look, that I would even be asked to consider that.
Even without being in a home like this, today, a baby is born with as many as 290 toxins that they get right off the bat from the umbilical cord. Wow. So that if somebody wants to have a child, both the husband, it comes from the male and the female, they got to clean up at least a year before they conceive. They've got to clean up their diet. They've got to clean up their environment. They have to get rid of every single toxin anywhere near them so that they can have a healthy child. And one of the reasons our children are dealing with so many allergies today is because they're getting it right. In my generation, we didn't get it from our parents. I probably did a little bit because I was born in Pittsburgh, and my joke was always I popped out allergic to Pittsburgh. And I did have heavy toxic metals in me when I finally looked into it as an adult. But generally, kids are not born with a significant toxic load. But now that's why they have so many allergies right from the beginning. They have a toxic load right from the beginning. Now you add that to the fact that you've got this significantly toxic house. So what do
It's
you do?
awful. It's
Yeah,
awful. Well, I had 100 huge hurdles literally in the 100 first days, not only to just understand what meth toxins does to a home, uh, uh, how do you remediate it? What is remediation? Who? How do you go through this? The checks and the balances, the processes and the protocols in our state, because every state is different.
right.
25 about 25 states have some protocol on it, and there's another 25 states that have zero on it, zero requirements on it, and yet I learned about the epidemic use of methamphetamine in the way of smoking it and other ways. I also learned that although my situation may be more unique as far as somebody making it, a lab of cooking it, the usage is rampant, and it equates to this whole opioid addiction levels and pain and the addictions and how people were dying, but nobody's talking about it. I had to start the conversation when I learned, after being in residential real estate as an affiliate in lending for over 30 years, sitting in thousands of closings, having conversations with realtors all over in Southern California and here as a professional and other places as well. Yet I had never heard anybody ever talk about methamphetamine contamination in real estate. And nobody's having that conversations. That was my call to action. I
But it's
really had to
rampant the way you
it
shared
is.
with me in our first phone
It
conversation.
is. It's rampant. The usage is rampant. There aren't as many labs today as there were back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, early 2000s as back then. But what I also learned is the meth that was cooked in those homes back then, it doesn't dissipate. It doesn't go away. It just gets covered over and painted over, and then it works its way through. But the meth usage is the meth today is coming out of Mexico by the drug cartel. It's cheaper, it's stronger, it's even more dangerous. It's cut with fentanyl, so people are dying at huge, unprecedented levels based off of what it was before. I'm not here to change and have an impact on the drug usage and all that. It's way out of my pay grade in that sense. But I'm here to have the conversations about the toxins that it leaves behind, not only to the people who use it, but to their
And how
family
the
members.
laws did not protect you in any way.
No, the
That
laws have
every
not.
way you went, the property management company wasn't held responsible. You were held responsible.
Yep.
Um, and how could you know? And yet the liability still fell directly on you.
And here's the other weird thing that I learned, Cheryl, is that there was a disconnect. Although he was arrested for major 14 felony counts, EF1s, or three EF1s, huge amounts of dangerous criminal activity. Nobody came and knocked on my door and said, hey, he was cooking meth in your house, you need to have this tested. I did all this on my own because I started to learn about what meth did and the impacts it had on the home. And it literally cost me thousands of dollars every month. Once I had that test done in my home was condemned. I couldn't live in it. Yet you still got to pay your mortgage unless you're going to tank your credit, right? You made a promise to pay a lender, and the lender isn't going to just take that asset back and let you mail in the keys. There's going to be that whole process. And then you got to figure out where you're going to live while you're
When all
dealing
your
with
money's
this.
in the house that this happened to.
Right. Right. The other piece I just want to share with you really quickly, I don't want to run out of time, is what happened to my home afterwards. I sold it last year, um, April of 2020, fully disclosed, fully contaminated, thinking it would go as like a land deal, like a builder would buy it and scrape it. And I just got out of my mortgage. I left hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of equity on the table. And it turned out that some people bought it uh, based off their research. They thought they could potentially get it clean. They knew they were rolling the dice, but they thought they could get it clean and they were going to hold on to it as a rental. And instead, they couldn't get it fully clean. But what they were able to do is go uh, through our processes here in Colorado. They were able to get what's called a variance and encapsulate what meth they could not get clean with a some product. I know there are oil-based paints out there. I don't know what they used. I'm not privy to that information, but they were able to use a product and seal in what they couldn't get clean inside the home, as well as I could tell that there was, some oil paste based type of varnish or something used on the outside based off the pictures. And then it passed. And then they sold it instead of deciding to keep it as a rental. They mentioned something about, oh, they were worried about, the tenant abusing it or something like that. They chose to sell it. 5.5 months later, they sold this home undisclosed of the meth, because they weren't required to, for almost $300,000 more than they bought it from me.
But the poor people who bought that house had no idea what they were getting.
That's hard to say. I don't know, because I listed it fully disclosed. And so depending upon the due diligence that they did in looking at previous sales, it's hard to say whether they found that or they chose to, based off of the research that they may have done. If our state health department has a standard that says that this is safe, even though I did research and I have reports that says remediation and encapsulation doesn't necessarily mean it's going to stay in there and it's gone. Remediation doesn't mean gone, and encapsulation doesn't necessarily mean it's safe. I chose not to take that route. They may have thought, well, our state health department says it's okay, so it must be okay. I believe that everybody has a right to full transparency, and that is the missing link to any state laws that have any sort of regulation or laws around meth contamination disclosure, that it should be disclosed all the way
And one of
through.
the things you shared with me when we first started talking was I could check that spot over there on my wall and it could pass. And then
Yeah.
I could check this spot over here on this wall and it does not pass because the ceiling did not work as well on that area of my wall. So the room is still getting contaminated.
It could be. Yeah. We only are required to check a 2 centimeter squared amount of real estate on each wall, and even the flooring. And you could have them check where the intakes are to the furnace and the ventilation systems and the fans, the exhaust fans in the bathrooms, all sorts of things. There's places where it will be the most common. At low levels, it may not be as impactful. I see it both ways. I see it still can be dangerous, and I see it's not harmful at all. So it really depends upon who's writing that particular report.
80% of us have some kind of metabolic illness in the United States.
Right.
I just looked that up and I was appalled that many of us are impacted by environmental toxins and all of the different lifestyle habits that we have that are not supporting our bodies. So if you're one of those 80%, having all those toxins in your home cannot do anything good for your health. It's only going to exacerbate the situation.
Absolutely.
And so there is no good outcome from, and is there a company that can come out and check a home and tell
Yes.
you, because I got molded in my office before I sold my business. So I know that that's a hard thing to get rid of. And
Right.
there are people that come out and check all the air around you. But even at that, they're checking the indoor air compared to the amount of mold outside that building in the same area. So they're comparing two different numbers. If the outside has mold in it and the inside has mold of it, maybe they decide the inside mold isn't so terrible. But you don't want to be living in that, especially if you're someone who's immune compromised.
Right.
So, yeah, wow, you need to know about this.
I think everybody should take this seriously. It's really not a sensationalized topic. It's just an unknown topic, and that's that's why I'm here to. I believe that awareness and education are key ingredients to protecting your family and yourself against the health and the physical impacts, and of course, the financial devastation down the road. I know of very specific instances when people have chosen to short term a space in their home, like a room, and found methamphetamine paraphernalia and had to deal with it. I know of family who, just as the pandemic was starting, bought a home that had recently been uh, just put on the market, fixed and flipped. So it looked good, it smelled good, it was like it had fresh paint and a nice facelift. And when they bought it, that too turned out to be contaminated with meth, and it was condemned by the county here in the Denver metro area, and they had to move out and get separated as a family. And they're still dealing with the legal process of it, even though here's another key, they sold their home last November, and they chose and they remediated the meth per the state standards. Um, there's every state is different, or every county, your county or your city or your state may have different regulations, and you have to go to those websites. And my organization, Meth Toxins Awareness Alliance, has a map where you can get a hyperlink and just go directly to your own health department if you want, or just Google the health department in your county or your state and see where they take you when it comes to meth contamination. But that being said, this particular family chose to remediate it and sell the home, and they disclosed it that it had been contaminated with meth. And it passed after remediation. It was retested, it was released, it was allowed to be lived in, and then people came in and they bought it, or they went under contract. They looked over all the paperwork that this family had, and they chose, because it had been contaminated before, they chose to have certain areas retested. And guess what? It there was at least one, and I'm going off of memory here, maybe two hotspots that came up. Again, to my comment, remediation doesn't mean it's gone. If you test over here when you have it remediated and then you have it cleared, that doesn't mean the next company that comes in to test doesn't go further down the wall or further on the floor or wherever and find a hot spot.
And I would
So,
imagine over time things change,
yeah.
where it may pass at one moment in time. A year later, it may start to leach some of those toxins out through whatever the sealing process was.
And that's
Um,
true. People paint over it, and then it gets encapsulated with a new fresh coat of paint, and it may or may not stay encapsulated. No, there's not enough data to really support, you know, definitively exactly what happens to a home, to somebody's health, to either one of them. Nobody, there's all these silos, all these states and even countries. I mean, there's meth contamination. It's a global thing, and there's not enough data to really support any of it. So that's my point: is awareness and education are key. We're talking about our homes here, Cheryl, but it's important for me to share with you that I'm not here to instill fear, but it's not just our homes. The particular person in my house, he was consuming meth. He was making meth, it's easy. You can make meth with a 2-liter bottle of a soda bottle these days in a shake up method of some sort. Uh, I don't even know if they ever tested his car, but I know his car ended up on the, on the auction block in the wholesale markets, and ended up, I think we traced it back to Texas somewhere, and that kind of thing, because he had a loan on it, and I think it got repoed, and when those things happen, then they get sold on wholesale.
So then somebody bought a car that was loaded with all of these toxins.
Probably. And I'm not here to say absolutely, because I have no specific data on it, but I am here to say that I've been aware of this more and more as I keep peeling back the layers of this, is that at least here in our area, I mean, auto thefts are up, I don't know, over 130%. And when they do find paraphernalia related to drugs like meth, a meth pipe, and foilies and other things, or even the actual drugs on the person, I think more insurance companies are testing that vehicle for meth contamination. And I'm hearing that it's so hard to get it out of there that they just total the vehicle, even if it's in good shape. So I implore people to do their research. Our Airbnbs and our VRBOs.
Well, that was what got my attention, because
right.
My husband and I were only married 6 years. We had 2 homes in California. So we sold one and we bought a second home in Sedona. We are not allowed to rent our home because of our association.
Mhm.
But it ends up that probably has saved us from a shooting bullet, because if we were to rent our home as an Airbnb for only 30 days, if somebody's doing something like this in our home, they're not responsible. We're responsible. We're responsible that we've put our neighbors at danger. We're responsible for what happens to our home during the time. The property management company is not responsible. Who would know to not rent to somebody like this? Certainly I don't. I mean, I don't have anywhere near your background. And so
yeah, what I'm learning is we're just not protected under the insurances with criminal activity. And since meth is not legal in the way people are using it and or manufacturing, there's no legal basis for it all, for any of it. There's probably the propensity that you will be declined if you submit a claim. I found that in, with other industries as well. I mean, the marijuana industry, Colorado was first here for legalizing marijuana. And, our laws say that each person can grow a certain amount of plants. But if you exceed that number, and then there's a fire in your home, or maybe you have a drip system and there's a flood in your home, I keep asking different insurance carriers, would they be covered? And the answer is probably not. Because if there was a fire, if you're allowed to have 6 plants and you live alone and you have 10, and something happens to your home and the evidence is there that you exceeded 6, you broke the law. So all I'm saying is I'm not here to validate whose insurance covers what. You just have to check with your carrier.
I wanted you to share this because I want to raise awareness, because this is pretty frightening. And having gotten into toxins with my own autoimmune disease,
right,
I know that, number one, toxins are devastating for health. So what these meth toxins do, I mean, I was loaded with heavy toxic metals. I still am dealing with the toxic mold that I got. I can't get it out of my body. I have something called MTHFR, and what goes in my body stays in my body. So that's an issue if you're in one of these homes that has one of these issues. But even with bodies, I detox. It took me 2 years to get the heavy toxic metals out of my body. And then we tested again, kind of on a fluke, 2 years after that. And my body very efficiently had packed the part that was not evident in the body into my fat and my bones. and was now leaching back out into my body. So I thought I had gotten all the heavy toxic metals. And when I tested, they were all there again. I had to go through the whole heavy toxic metal routine a second time that took me another 2 years. So you can just imagine what these meth toxins are doing to your body once you get them in you, and how much destruction they're doing to your health or to your child's health, heaven forbid. So to raise awareness that this is even a possibility is enormous. And
It
people
is.
do need to be aware of this, and they do need to be now especially careful. If there's a company that can come out and test, don't just let them test the 2 places in your room. Have them test the room. It's worth it to spend the money to know what you're going to get when you move into that house.
Yes, there are, I mean, different areas have different types of tests. Our communities here in Colorado, in a real estate transaction, I think it's one of the best. I mean, we're testing for radon, which isn't a requirement. It's not a standard. It's a standard contamination in this area, through the granite, through the rocks, and things like that. So people tend to test for it. It's cheaper, it's less expensive than a meth test. And it all depends upon the number of samples that they take for your house. But I'm here to say that I've seen homes that you can't geographically profile a home anymore. You can't physically see, you can't physically smell it. It's not, low income, high crime type of areas anymore. I lived in a little bedroom community where you could literally see our sheriff substation parking lot from my driveway, and the sheriff cars from my driveway. So it's not something like Breaking Bad that I've heard of. That's Hollywood. It's everywhere. You can't profile a home, a neighborhood, a community, a city, a state, a rural area. And I would say, especially in these unprecedented times, Cheryl, in real estate, where we're just, waking up to a pandemic. Where were people for the, last year and a half?
They were in
Uh,
their homes.
they were in their homes. And if recreational use uh, has been at epidemic proportions, I guarantee people were not necessarily being kind and going outside. They were, they were doing it right there in the comfort of their own homes, or
Right,
yours. Yeah,
right. That's why it was so important that I have you come share your story,
I appreciate that.
because there's an awareness that needs to be out there, and you have discovered resources for people to tap into. And one of the things I told you I'm going to do is, you have a sheet of other podcasts that you have done and some resources. So I'm going to give that a bit.ly link and put it right down underneath this conversation, so that people who are going to buy property or use a property management company can start to do their research before they do that, so that they don't end up in the situation that you have found yourself in, because there was nothing that you knew that could have avoided what you ended up getting as a
Right.
result of this whole thing.
And I've learned some things about the property management industry in itself. There's some great people out there that are doing awesome jobs, doing their, fulfilling their roles and responsibilities in that industry. But there's a lot of them that necessarily don't. They don't necessarily have the insurance coverages that they need. If you have a property management company that's got dozens of properties that they're managing, there's a certain amount of risk that they take, and there's different types of insurance that they should have per incident, as well as their aggregate total annually. And doing the research on those companies, property management companies, and the different issues that they may have had with their properties is hugely important. And following up and being part of that decision making process is also important. If you're going to have somebody live in your home, you should have the opportunity to review the documentation that they present to a management company yourself, or take it to a third party to help you review it. And a few extra dollars spent, I promise you, will save you the heartache and the pain and the hundreds of thousands of dollars that could happen in a situation like this. I could go on and on and on, and I just invite your audience to reach out to me if they want to have a more in-depth conversation, or if they want to have a presentation done to their group or organization, things like that. Learn more about the resources in their area. I'd be happy to, because as I mentioned, prevention is key. With my home, I apologize. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well,
No.
I was just gonna say, with my home, it was unique that that he was manufacturing it as well as probably consuming it. I personally never saw him, but I'm here to say I'm sure he was consuming it. The physical safety that my community, my neighbors in my community were in, based off of the excessively dangerous hardware that he had and chemicals that he had in my home, that were not just related to meth, but it was that equipment that I told you that was behind my house was a THC extraction system. So he was making other drugs related to extracting THC. And I also learned about THC drug or usage called dabbing, where they turn the THC into some sort of a waxy substance, and they also smoke it. So it's a very high level of THC concentrations. And maybe I'll introduce you to a very wise woman who knows this firsthand from a harsher situation than me. But it creates a psychosis when you ingest and smoke this THC in the way of dabbing, because the concentrations are so high, especially in our young people. And there are suicide levels at epidemic proportions because of it with our young people consuming
Well,
THC
and our
through
young
dabbing.
people have suicide at epidemic proportions without all this crap.
Anyway, and then you mix that up. So I don't know that dabbing yet was going on in my home. I'm still waiting to hopefully get an opportunity to review the inventory sheets of everything that they got there. But those steel cylinders that I mentioned to you, those were some sort of flames that come out of there. I live in the forest. We were just out of a phase 2 fire ban in Evergreen, down to a phase 1, and our whole community could have easily burned up. I'm not here to sensationalize it. I'm here to say that we were lucky we didn't have a Paradise, California in Evergreen, Colorado 90 days after Paradise happened back in 2018. And so these types of behaviors not only put my home at risk, but more importantly, I have nothing but gratitude that they didn't, my neighbors weren't impacted, their homes weren't impacted, and more importantly, their lives weren't impacted, because there wouldn't have been insurance for them either, but their physical life was at risk, their safety was at risk. So those are those are some of those important pieces that I'm really here to just bring that education to, and to your viewers. So thank you.
Because awareness is everything. Now, let me stop for 1 second and
Sure.
tell me, how are you doing with your Graves' disease? Certainly the stress level from all of this has been unbelievable, and stress and autoimmune disease are linked. So are you doing okay, considering that you through the surgeries, but once you have an autoimmune disease, you will always have an autoimmune disease. So
Yes,
how's
yes.
your body handling all of this?
I'm a strong girl, but I am human, and I do have flares. I had a pretty significant flare of my TEDs in September. I don't remember the exact date, but I know it was a week after I saw my endocrinologist doctor. So because I was clicking along there for a little bit, but I know that diet is significant. When I one of the things that I was treated with was high levels of steroids, IV steroids, to try to bring the inflammation down from the TEDs before they had to intervene with very, very significant surgeries, one on each eye, to take the pressure off my optic nerves. The inflammation that your body creates was compressing my optic nerves, and I was losing my sight. They weren't able to reverse it with the steroids, but at least it didn't progress. But they did have to go in and do something very significant to make more room for inflammation. That being said, the steroids, along with my poor diet, I mean, it seemed to kick me into a higher level. I was pre-diabetic, and I haven't been able to, through natural remedies, get back
But
to.
now that your stress level can start to come down,
I
because
hope so.
you're
Yes.
through the worst of this,
Right.
and stress has a direct impact on autoimmune disease. So over time, you can get your diabetes more under control. You may
Right.
always be diabetic, but you can get it more under control. And with my mold, I'm also diabetic. I've come way down. And for a short period of time, I was almost out of pre-diabetes at the end, but it's back up. And it's because the mold in my body leaches out again, and then I'm dealing with it again. So you can start to do things that will alleviate some of that on your body, that will bring you back to what I call relative wellness, because you will never be completely free of all of this stuff, but you will be able to live a full life with relative wellness that you wouldn't have been able to had you not been aware of it or been dealing with all of this. So
I'm
yeah,
looking
it's huge.
forward to putting this last piece of this chapter behind me, with some some great things moving forward in 2022 for continuing to launch the awareness and the education on meth contamination in our homes and in other parts of our lives. This situation has, I'm houseless currently. As I went through the stages, the legal process, I was priced right out of the market because the market just got so high so quickly, and the management company didn't think I was entitled to an equal home anywhere, and their predatory practices of their legal team. So I'm here to say that I am just launching a next chapter, because I don't want anybody to go through the stages that I've had to go through. And, this is a good chapter in my life to take this message and this mission and move it forward for prevention and protection. So I'm excited.
And when you saw me take a breath, what I was going to say is you have found your mission through all of this, because this has been such a horrific experience for you. You want to save other people from having it happen to them.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely. I like I said, the legal process, the civil process with the management company ended in a mediated settlement that did not allow me to buy a home during that process. Nothing equivalent to anywhere close to what I had, which was a very modest cabin, in a community where I raised my kids, lived there 25 years. I do have a legal judgment against civil judgment against the tenant for a significant amount of money. That's where the illusion of protection comes into play, because you got to collect, and there's, that's just not going to happen, which is, unfortunate, as well as the insurance piece. So I say my situation may be unique, but what I learn every day that I do more and more research, it's not that unique. And that's where the awareness, we really need our media to step up and bring this information to forefront. I'm working with our local legislators to try to put protections around improving our protections here in Colorado, and hopefully, further down the road, it's kind of, it's where Breaking Bad, give it sort of a cliche. It's where Breaking Bad has me channeling my Erin Brockovich. She's been a very inspiring, figure, all those 30 years ever since the movie. And so I learn a lot about what it means to get this piece behind me and really be an activist in all of this, for the
Right.
for the good of
And I
of the
congratulate you for
everybody.
that because you certainly have raised my awareness. Never in my wildest dreams would I have thought that that would happen to anybody that I knew. I
Right.
didn't realize it was going on. I didn't realize it, how prevalent it is. And
Yes.
although I'm aware that we have some serious issues with drugs in this country, it never occurred to me that it was impacting non-users' lives in this way.
Right.
Um,
The other thing I think is really important, because we have this whole industry focused on helping people kick drugs. And I really, I'm going to raise my hand here. And if any of your listeners are in the drug recovery industry, I would welcome the opportunity to bring this information to the people that support those drug users, because there may be contamination in their homes and in their lives, and it's something they can't ignore. They just can't. And I know people are afraid to learn the truth. They don't want to deal with the financial impact, uh, but it can be so highly dangerous. I it's just something that needs to be done.
Now, you're available to do podcasts, you're available to
Mhm.
go speak to groups.
Yes.
How else do you want to get your information out so that people who are listening to this can then follow the link and contact you?
Right. Well, and the groups could either be through Zoom. I've aligned here in Colorado with meth testing companies that are certified to teach CE classes and get credit, like through realtors and other people. And of course, I want to look to align with people in other communities, other cities, other states, for things like that. But even for non-CE credits, I can make presentations either in person or online. I'm going to see you soon, I believe,
I know, we're
in
going to a summit together.
we're going to an amazing summit together, and our hostess of that summit is also walking me through a process where I am looking to publish a digital magazine related to this. So I invite people who want to learn more to reach out to get information, and they can be an end user to that, or as a professional in many different industries, whether you're in the health industry, the wellness, law enforcement, real estate, lending, any peripheral industry. There's so insurance. There's so many end users, wealth management, all sorts of industries of people that could benefit from this. I welcome you to reach out to me. And then also, if you have a story, if you have a meth contamination story and you want to share, if you go to my website also, you can fill out a form and reach out to me, or just just call me or whatever, because I would love to know your story and potentially share this also. We really need
And
to
meeting people
collaborate.
on parallel paths is very valuable. So
Right,
the
right.
more of you that join together to get this word out, the healthier the world will be. So
I've met, I had a dear friend, 86, 3 months after that I learned of my own home, he went to go sell his home here in the Front Range of Denver, in a suburb community, a quiet little cul-de-sac. And he went to sell his home, got it under contract. These people did do a meth, asbestos, and lead test. It hit hot for all three. We spent a year getting his home cleaned up at a level where then it could be uh, sold. And why this is so impactful, Cheryl, is my friend at that time was 86 years old, and it turned out that he had a home health person, not working for an agency, but an individual living in his home, that was smoking meth in the downstairs bathroom. And that bathroom was vented to the furnace room instead of outside. So when the furnace went on, it sucked in all that air and just dissipated the meth throughout the home. We spent a year, and he spent, between holding on to the home for a whole extra year with, homeowners insurance, taxes, utilities, and then cleaning up the meth. It was about $110,000 that he spent to get it clean, to be able to then sell it. So there's a lot of unique stories out there. We could be here all day.
I know,
So,
but yeah, no, that's why the magazine will be invaluable.
yeah,
So that's
I'd
fantastic.
just like to bring this information, not to instill fear, but to educate people and to avoid this
Awareness
happening
is
to them.
everything, right?
It is. And I thank you for having me here, and being introduced to you through some new mutual friends has just been a highlight for me. You're bringing a wealth of information to me, and how to learn about how to take better care of myself, and to manage the things that I need to do
Yeah, well,
better.
on that part, I can help you. And so we'll
Yes.
work on that because I want you to be the healthiest you can be. But yeah,
Appreciate
no.
that. Appreciate that.
So yeah.
I at the tender age of 61, I have a lot of life I want to live. So I
Hey,
thank you
look,
for
I'm
that.
72 and I'm not ready to not live my life as well.
Right, right. So thank you for that. Thank you for this platform, for what you bring to the audience on wellness and information and education. It's so much needed. Appreciate you.
So your story is so unique. It breaks my heart that you had to go through all this. But I'm excited about your new future because you're going to touch a lot of lives and make a difference.
Well, we chatted about this earlier, where I know this didn't happen to me. I know it happened for me, that it was through the education and the experience I had in the background to recognize this, that I am simply the conduit to bring this information that so many are experiencing, and bring their stories to life, and to help avoid this for others. So thank you.
Absolutely. So thank you very much for joining me. And I will put all the information under this when this gets published so that you can find Kathi and you can get more information to protect yourself so that this never happens to you. So thank you, Kathi. I'm really delighted to have had you as a guest on my show.
Thank you, Cheryl.